will go under review.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. The tagline tonight is literally just because I saw maybe an hour ago that Duolingo said they killed the owl. I have no idea what that meant, but I thought it was hilarious. So that's the only reason I made that my tagline. There is no hidden meaning behind it whatsoever. But we are in the offseason, folks. The Super Bowl has come and gone. The Chiefs lose to the Eagles. I'm sure it was a bit of an exorcism for every Bills fan who was jaded by the AFC Championship game. And now our sights can fully be set on offseason prep, as well as roster building, the draft, free agency, all of the fun things that come in the spring and summer that we are looking so very much forward to here in the network. And tonight's episode will be going over this Bills roster as it stands today, the needs for each positional group, who we think will stay, who we think will go, who we are cool with staying and going, and maybe some specific detailed needs, such as what type of players would fit these rooms best given the results of this past season. And when I say we, of course, never just me and me. I have a guest every week, and tonight's guest is one of my favorite people to bring on the show because he was just, honestly, is one of my favorite people to talk to about football in our group, and that is Mr. David Fox. David, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. I know it was a bit of short notice, so it is greatly appreciated. I can't think of a different word. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Well, thank you for the very lovely introduction. That was not scripted, so that feels even better. Listen, as someone whose secondary team or second favorite team, or maybe even just their 1B team, right, being the Philadelphia Eagles, because my mom is from Philly. Man, let me tell you something. If I can't talk at a certain point during this show, it's because I lost my voice screaming during that game. That Cooper DeJean pick six sent me through the roof. I was losing my mind. Great game.
I agree. I thought it was a great game. I thought it was fun to see an old evil just be vanquished. And yes, really undeniably vanquished. It wasn't even a game. I mean, even from the first series on offense for Kansas City, that Philadelphia defensive line just had complete control of this entire game. And, you know, a lot of Patrick Mahomes getting flustered very quickly because the protection just couldn't hold up. The run game couldn't get going. It wasn't until it was like 24-0 that you had semi-kindlings of Chiefs offense. And even then it wasn't enough. And listen, you know, that Philadelphia construction of roster and scheme, those are things that I think are, you know, they're not unicorn-like. They're not unprecedented when it comes to how the team is built and how they're successful. They're just talented and they play what they play. And even if it's simple, they just execute at such a high level because of that talent and because of that coaching. And with this Bills team and this roster that we're going to get into tonight, David, I just don't think it's far-fetched to say that if you can hit right, again, something we've said every year, you really can kind of replicate that approach defensively and be a team that can win with four, because that's what they want to do. You know, it's a world they want to live in, and something that I feel is an attainable one. So I'm just going to ask you first, you know, before we get deeper into this discussion, just your overall thoughts on really the way the roster has shaped up. You could talk about, you know, from last season to this season, but what your kind of expectations are as far as what the Bills will do to address kind of positions in need, and what do you think they'll prioritize, free agency or draft?
To me, the priority, I would think, kind of has to be the defensive line, and especially given the way that Super Bowl played out, like, you have to look at it, because it's not just the fact that the Eagles have a like elite level starting front four, right? Because I could argue they really don't have like an elite front four. It's just that the guys that they have in that first group are so good all around, but also the second group can also get pressure and maintain their gap integrity on run defense. Like Jalix Hunt, who was a third round pick from like Texas Methodist or Texas Christian or
Mhm.
some Texas Christian school. Uh, Ended up getting a sack and a really good looking sack too. He converted that speed to power and just rolled right through Joe Tooney and got that sack. And yeah, obviously Nolan Smith has come along, which I don't think a lot, especially after a basically absent rookie season, I don't think
Yep.
people quite expected him to come on in the way that he did. And obviously Jalen Carter's just been so impressive as a interior defensive tackle, and just the rotation that these guys have. Your guy, Milton Williams, who I'm sure you'll be pining for in free agency and we'll be talking about later in the show.
Yeah,
Just
real quick, I'm never going to shut up about Milton Williams, even if it's a pipe dream. Like that's priority one for me for the Bills. I love Milton Williams.
and he's a great like inside out piece, right? He's somebody that can play multiple spots on that defensive line and has, and Josh Sweat had such an amazing game for them. He's set to be a free agent as well. So it's not just getting four guys and saying, all right, that's good. It's about getting a rotation. And that's obviously been part of the Bills' focus in constructing their defensive line over the years with McDermott and Bean. Is just having a rotation. Problem is they haven't found all of the right guys. And even at times where they find the right guy in Von Miller, and I think that was the right decision at the time. It would, frankly, it would be a like deliberately contrarian at the time, and even now with hindsight, to say like, oh, that wasn't really the right decision. It's like that was absolutely the right decision. You saw how that decision played out in the first 8 games of the season when he was healthy.
Mhm.
It's just that he didn't stay healthy, and it sucks, but that's just what happened. So defensive line to me has to be the priority. Only other thing that I can really think about, I guess, would be maybe finding another corner right on the
Mhm.
boundary if they decide to let go of Russell Douglas, and some wide receiver. I'm not 100% sure what to do at wide receiver. I just know they need another one, like just another one. I don't know who that is, but it's they need some other dynamic to that wide receiver room that they don't have right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Working backwards, wide receiver. I mean, I think the framework or the groundwork has been laid out in that room. I think there's talent in it. If you bring back Mac Hollins, I think the core of guys you have are good. If Keon Coleman develops, then you go from good to really good, maybe even great. But I do think that as far as archetypes and what you want, they have their blockers, they have their guys that can win when you talk about at the catch point, the physical presence, but they do need a separator. And I think that was proven multiple times throughout the year where in clutch situations, if Josh can't buy you time, you want someone you could trust to just get a step on someone in a one-on-one or just find vacated space and use speed. And I think there are options for them in free agency and the draft that they could go for that I think would just complement the room where, again, kind of similar to what the vision was with MVS, it's not going to be your alpha all the time winning guy, but rather just that ancillary piece that is a threat just from speed and his presence on the field, how you run him pre to post snap can be heights for or be a way to heighten this offense and in turn give you more dynamic of a passing attack. But I agree with you. I mean, defensive line, I think the one thing I will say about Brandon Beane, because he's been a hot topic, over the past week because of that Super Bowl and because of kind of the deficiencies they had in the playoffs. Brandon Beane's heart has been in the right place, right? Like 2022 was a full scale investment in the defensive line, and I was very pleased with it. You go out and you sign Von Miller, which, it didn't work out to the way you wanted it to because of injury. However, I do think the signing made a ton of sense and it was panning out to be great. You go and you get Daquan Jones, you go and you get Tim Settle, rotational pieces. Jordan Phillips comes back, Shaq Lawson comes back. You still had AJ, you still had Groot. Like on paper, that D line was very heavily invested into, and it was pretty much working the way you wanted it until the dynamic, edge rusher, the playmaker you got hurt, and all of a sudden it kind of falls apart slowly but surely with more injury, more doubt, and all of a sudden it's, what happened. I think Brandon Beane has shown that he is willing to invest in the positional group that he definitely feels is underwhelming or at the very least not executing to a level that they want. And because of that, I think that's what's going to happen this upcoming season. Just again, when you look at the successive teams that they've gone against, the team that beat them, that has that prolific interior rusher and Chris Jones and guys like Omenahu and Karlaftis, who are really efficient, powerful, even if they don't have the size, the rushers to get things done. And for that reason, I'm very optimistic about the way they will attack defense, as well as some of the coaching changes they've made, maybe getting them to a point where you can replicate what you were able to see, at least to some extent, what Philly did. But we'll have to wait and see. And of course, I posted a tweet earlier today that a lot of people responded to, and it was super cool. And I haven't done something like this on the show in a long time. I did the stupid thing of not sharing my screen before the show went live. So we're going to do that now and hope it doesn't self-destruct this entire thing. 3, 2, 1. Let's find out, everybody. We're in this together. David, can you still hear me?
I can't. Has this been an issue before?
Yes. Sharing your screen on StreamYard when you're live can mess with connection and slow everything down, to the point where buttons you click, just don't click. And sometimes I can't even see the share screen thing, and it just looks like completely nothing on my end, and I have to improv. So regardless, it works. You said it works, so that's awesome.
It works. I can hear you. I can see the screen. We're good to go.
So that's one thing. Two things. Thanks to everyone who responded to this. But the first thing I want to point out. So when I type this on Buffer, I had my laptop and I have one of the Macs that has the emoji bar or the touchscreen on top. And I also have if I need to get an emoji on it, I'll type the actual word to prompt it. So I did that. I forgot to delete the word, which is why the tweet says the Bills will need to address multiple positional groups this offseason if they want to get over the hump. Which group do you think the Bills should prioritize and why? Football.
Okay, so I've done that before. I've done that once before, and it is one of the more embarrassing things that I can do during a text or anything. And thankfully, it was just a one person, and I don't think they really cared or noticed. But it's one of those things that I'm always so aware of now, where I'm like, okay, all right, did I? Nope, gotta delete it. Gotta delete that. Gotta delete that.
I'm so mad at myself, but I honestly, when I saw the typo, I started cracking up and I'm like, you know what? We're leaving it alone. F that. That's funny. So we got some great responses. I did promise Christopher that I was going to read his as well as some other people. And I'm going to start with Christopher's because I think he took an approach to this that I actually wasn't expecting. And he said, I think the Bills should prioritize the offense first. We were able to hang with KC to tie the game up, but we did not have another marquee player besides Allen or Cook. If we find a guy in free agency and draft, we could do what Philadelphia did on Sunday, which I think when we're talking about the offense, like what we just alluded to, David, the separator component, that absolutely is a part that they need to address. And I do think that a separator, when you talk about the ending of that game, despite it being really more of a protection issue, that if you have someone that can consistently be a deep threat, maybe the call is different. Maybe one play, maybe one reception changes your whole entire dynamic where you're not fighting for a yard on a 4th and 1, but rather more confident in airing things down the field against a really stingy defense. And I like this. I mean, I definitely think I'd prioritize defense, but I'm cool with this. If they want to go get a Hollywood Brown or maybe a Tutu Atwell or one of those separating guys, that's there for them. I mean, what do you think about this comment?
So I really like I do like that is true. But I agree that there does need to be some other part of this offense. And I feel confident, relatively speaking, in Keon Coleman taking another step forward in year 2. I like bringing Matt Collins back if that's the route they decide to go. Obviously, Khalil Shakir is amazing. But you look at this, especially in free agency, there's not a for sure, okay, get this guy and everything's good. Unless we're all just really into bringing back Stephon Diggs to the Bills. Or unless they want to get into what I imagine will be a crazy bidding war for T. Higgins, which I don't think they'll ever come close to affording. So that leaves you with some limited options. I mean, one of those guys that's interesting would be a Chris Godwin. The problem is he's going to have to work his way back from another kind of brutal leg injury. Deontay Johnson is out there. At this point, he's out there for a reason because no other team seems to want to put up with whatever's going on there. DeAndre
Yeah.
Hopkins is going to be available probably. Brandon Cooks is interesting to me, even if he doesn't have the same speed that he once had now at 32 years old. He is somebody that can still win deep and win with technique and has solid hands. I think that that's interesting to me. Marquise Brown, I think, is also just like I would be really interested in Hollywood Brown. And the other guy that I think could be interesting is Darius Slayton, who has
Mm,
kind of just languished with the Giants for so long. And not only does he bring speed, but he brings some pretty good size as well that I think could be helpful. And he's had some really solid seasons in the past, and some for some really bad Giants teams. And I think putting him on this team with the Bills, there, I'd be interested in seeing that. And I can imagine him not commanding a huge price tag, and I don't think Hollywood Brown would either. But I think Darius Slayton would be even cheaper than Hollywood Brown.
yeah. I like Slayton as an option too. I actually distinctly remember him kind of putting the Bills a little bit in a blender when we played the Giants a couple years ago with Tyrod Taylor starting. And I've always liked his game. I think he's a separator. I think he's got route running prowess, and you could use him over the middle of the field, down on the boundary. If he's not a size winner, he's more of just like a get a step on you kind of guy. But that's what you
Mhm.
need. And I think you could get him for a very nice contract. And if they were able to do that, I'd be pretty hyped. Because to me, again, I don't think, that alpha mainline guy is someone that they're going to get at least from like their roster building approach. Like, I don't think they're going to go out and get a T Higgins, or I don't think they're going to go and try to trade for like someone's alpha as much as if Coleman develops into that, that's awesome. But rather like, or if you've seen this offense this past year, the everybody eats mentality, we're just going to try and get a guy that just fits that skill set and work with that. And that'll be just fine for us because if we're running well, then everyone becomes, it kind of turns into like a force multiplier with each receiver where run game enhances the threat of their abilities and what we want to lean into, we have all the personnel to do it. So I like Christopher's comment and I like the idea of prioritizing offense. I think it could be prioritized because maybe it's not as big of a deficiency for this roster. And therefore, if you're talking about cheaper contracts, quick players to get and just fill that role out really quickly, they could do that first before they make wholesale investment into their defense, kind of to round out those pieces before they really go after it, or vice versa. It could be either or, depending on what Brandon Bean is feeling. I'm going to read this comment from D1 Fredo, the honored one. Cool name, which says defensive line has to be the top priority. You need to be able to get consistent pressure on top quarterbacks, especially in the offs. I got yelled at in our chat for saying Yoffs once, but he said off, so it's not the same thing. He said I like Groot, but he's been far too underwhelming in big games. Back to back versus KC, he no showed. Got to get an actual game changer on the D line. So the Rousseau conversation is really why I wanted to put this one up, David, because I still believe in Greg Rousseau. I still think he's a very good player. I'm still willing to extend Greg Rousseau, but I do think when we drafted him, you had the high hopes that his like freakishly big profile as the screen just disappeared and I didn't even touch
That's
anything.
my
So I'll
bad.
just read.
I
Oh,
touched
that you
something.
did that?
That's
Damn,
my bad.
man, that's messed up. Sabotage. But
There we go.
but like with Greg Rousseau, I still believe in the player. And I even still believe that as a pass rusher, we haven't seen his best work yet. But, the question about is he a game wrecker? Is he a game changer? I do think that that's valid. And will he ever become that is a valid question, which is why I do think they have to go for that game changer, whether that's a Myles Garrett, whether that's a Max Crosby, or whether that's in your draft. What do you think about this comment, David? Do you agree with him, or do you have a different stance on Groot and really the, pressing need for a D line?
So I like Groot a lot. It kind of feels like the same thing every year with Groot, though, where it's like this is a pretty good pass rusher who's a very good run defender, and if he just takes that one step forward, and it's like okay, but we're now in like year 5, it's time to take the step forward or get off the pot. It's just like you need to be able to do something here, and we can acknowledge the fact that it can't just be Greg Rousseau and that he is not necessarily in a position right now where, especially last year, right, where the interior defensive line just did not play all that well for most of the season. And the defensive end opposite of Greg Rousseau, whoever that was at most given moments, wasn't necessarily at a high level, right? But regardless of all that, right? Like just looking at Greg Rousseau on his own, it's there's something there. There's something there worth keeping. The question is, how much are you willing to pay for that? And
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm totally willing to commit the amount of money that he will likely be paid in order to bring someone like him on or
Right.
keep him rather.
Yeah. I I like that point, and I agree. If we're talking Rousseau's valuation is near the top of the market, then I'm okay with not paying that much money, given that the production output, while fine, is just that. It's been fine. Again, he's
Mhm.
one of those like complete, almost like you built out to go in with him, where you built up the other traits, the edge setting presence,
Oh,
assisting on certain pass rush moves where he's helping someone else get space. Like I think Rousseau does everything really well. He's just as a finisher, as an actual sack artist, that hasn't developed. So what are you willing to pay for that? And what is he going to think he's worth? And where is the discrepancy? Because what gives me some optimism is Ed Oliver's contract. Because I feel like the discussions about Ed Oliver a couple years ago were pretty similar in that you had the flashes from Ed Oliver of being like a game wrecking three tech, game wrecking DT, taking on doubles, but it was never consistent. So the contract extension he got was pretty fair given the production. And
mhm.
then another year later, he all of a sudden kind of emerges as a really good DT. And I know this year was kind of like a step back to some, but I think that those flashes were still there and he picked it up as the year went on. Could Rousseau have that same thing? And that's what we're going to have to see. And it's why I'm comfortable with average, middle of the pack AAV. But if that's like a top 5 contract or even top 10, um, I love the player. I think he could still do really well. I wouldn't be comfortable paying that unless, it was just they were so confident in him. They give him the contract,
Right.
and the following year he lives up to it. So we would have to see with that. And just one more comment to read here from Levi R. Wagner. He says, interior D line run stuffer had to commit too many bodies to stopping the run, which weakened the rest of the scheme. And I am a firm believer, at least for me, that in building a defensive line, I need to start this from middle. And I need to start it from the middle going to the edges. Edge rushers are great and they are super helpful in pass rush situations. And if they are good run setting edge defenders, that's awesome. Again, what we've talked about wanting Greg Rousseau to be. I find that this scheme can, by just this position group being enhanced to a degree of having like your Carter, your Quiddy Williams, your Chris Jones, your Jeffrey Simmons, that alone already raises the scheme. It raises the effectiveness of it. A four-man pressure-based system that uses pre-snap looks and disguising, that uses simulated pressures to mix it up, becomes all the more daunting if you have a true game wrecker in the interior of your defensive line that generates push from the interior. The Bills have Ed. Ed is really good. But I feel like at the one tech, at the nose tackle, whatever they want to use this DT as, that position becoming more than just, a free agent signing that's just a rotational body that's good, but not like great. That position getting enhanced to a level where they get their guy there for the not even just foreseeable future, but for the long term. That to me changes everything for this Bills defense. And I think if you could get that guy where four man is still hitting home and generating pressure, where run defense doesn't have to sell out because maybe the interior is getting pushed around a bit too much, it's the best thing that could happen for this Bills defense, at least in my opinion. And David, I'll flip it back to you. This comment and that point, what do you think before we move on to our actual nitty gritty of this episode?
So I think, the way that the Bills handled it last year, right, bringing back Daquan Jones, it seemed like the right idea because you looked at the projected longevity of that particular position. It's like, okay, there is some drop off, but it's not like a steep cliff. They tend to age well, that particular position on the interior. Unfortunately, that was not the case with Daquan Jones, who just seemed to hit a bit of a wall and wasn't nearly as disruptive and effective as he had been the last few years. So you figure out what you need to be able to do, and I think there are not only guys in free agency that I think would be nice to have, but there's also guys in this draft. This sort of the fun, I guess, if you want to call it.
Hmm.
Part of this being the biggest perceived need for the Bills is that there are options in free agency and especially in the draft at defensive end and at defensive tackle. It's a very strong class for those particular positions. So having some guy, and really, realistically speaking, if we know Brandon Bean and sort of his strategy and attacking the offseason, we know it's not going to be just one guy. It'll be multiple guys. It'll be a veteran or two. It'll be another draft pick and probably a high one, if not multiple high ones, right? I mean, we've
Hmm.
seen Brandon Bean in the past take multiple players at the same position in the same draft.
Yep.
Not that it was necessarily the best idea all the time, but regardless, right? Like Greg Rousseau, really solid pick. Boogie Basham never made any sense. Spencer Brown ends up being a really great pick. Tommy Doyle probably could have been that like
Yeah.
Alec Anderson type of player. And just the various injuries that he had just ended up derailing his whole career. And
Mhm.
regardless, though, we've seen him attack a particular position or two pretty heavily before. So it wouldn't surprise me if they look at how that group in those positions played throughout this whole season and they say we need to just go after this. And especially given, like I said, the way the Super Bowl ended up playing out, right? And where the Eagles not only get so much pressure, but do it with their front four without bringing a blitz. Technically, they brought a simulated pressure, which could be considered a blitz by some people, but that's neither here nor there. They won with four. That's what they were able to do. They were able to win with four. They were able to win with a rotation of guys. That's what the Bills have always strived to do. They have not been able to figure out the correct four guys and a rotation to work with it. So that's what they need to really be able to figure out. And guys like Javon Solomon and Dwayne Carter, how much do they figure into these plans? One would think quite a
Mhm.
bit, but given their lack of contributions in their first season, it's hard to say like, yes, they will definitely take a step forward. And I like both players. I liked both players coming out of the draft, but that is what it is right now.
Mhm. It's ambiguous, and with those two players specifically, I still believe in Dwayne Carter, even though it wasn't a great rookie year for him. And Javon Solomon had some flashes that I liked. I think they could factor in, but I think the conversation of like how much can they be dependent on and how much would it factor into the offseason course for Brandon Bean is definitely a fair question and one that I will be asking many times, especially if in free agency, if they do end up going, really heavily involved with defensive line, bringing in those players. It's like, is there a future for these guys, or was it kind of like, hey, let's take them and see what happens, and it just didn't pan out? But I would be more in line to believe that both of these guys are still a part of the plan. I think both had some tape to look at and say, you know what, we could build off this, but maybe more as a rotational piece, which is kind of what I believed both could be. Although I had higher hopes for Dwayne Carter emerging as a starter, still could happen. But yeah, it's when it comes to interior D line, that's the one I'm championing for all offseason. And it also just feels like the one that, we talk about free agency signings, and those have been great. But I loved your point about they've tried to build that rotation and just haven't gotten it done, haven't been able to do it successfully. And I'm just wondering maybe if they really send it into the draft with these large, hashtag team mass guys, then is that the answer? Is it really like changing the formula and just trying to add size to the interior where you have a class full of potentially starting caliber defensive tackles and maybe one or two players that you pick are willing and able to generate that push you're looking for and in turn be the thing you build around for this defensive line and also make the philosophy work even further with a four-man pressure, because it's hard to win with four. Like, that's the thing. I'm not blind to the fact that it's a difficult thing to do, considering you really need dynamic playmakers at those positions to sell the fact that you're not blitzing or sending extra bodies all the time. But it can be done. And we've seen teams do it. Even the Jets in our division, for as bad as the offense has been, we're known for having a really menacing four-man pressure with quarters coverage behind it. And it worked really well. They just couldn't throw a ball. So, of course, that gets lost in time. But this philosophy can work. The Bills want it to work. Brandon Beane's heart has been in the right place. It just hasn't been executed as well as we would have liked. And they got to turn back to the drawing board and try to find the personnel to fit. So, everybody, thank you so much for leaving your comments on Twitter. That was a lot of fun. I'll try to do that more on this show as we continue on into the offseason. We will get into our actual conversation with the roster in just a moment. But before we do, I don't know if you noticed David's shirt, or if you have X-ray vision and can see the shirt that I'm wearing underneath my hoodie, but that is the Cover One OnePass subscriber t-shirt, and technically employee because we all got one. And it is also our partnership with 26 Shirts, who designed this awesome t-shirt, and it is so comfortable and I wear it all the time. But if you are interested in becoming an insider, a OnePass member, the link is in the description below. For just $60, you could become a OnePass member. And I got to tell you, folks, that membership, that subscription is the lifeblood of our network. It allows you to have access to allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, second-to-second basis to provide you the content that we do on our channel, on all of our platforms. So if you are interested, sign up in the link below, and we appreciate each and every single one of you who have already signed up or are contemplating it. That Discord that we have is a ton of fun. There's awesome conversation every day, and you can be a part of it if you sign up. So we appreciate you. Thank you again for being here. Drop a like if you are having a good time. Drop a dislike if you hate my guts or hate the fact that I forgot to remove football from the tweet. And let's get into this conversation, David. And when I was coming up with this, I was deciding if I wanted to do like offense only, but I'm like, you know what? There's some positional groups that I don't think I have much to add to, like quarterback or like really, running back to some extent. Like there's things to talk about, but rather there is definitely more of an emphasis on certain positional groups. So we're going to go through each one, and we will start with quarterback. And I don't know if you have any strong opinions either way of who should stay or who should go or any needs for this group at all. So I'll turn it to you. Anything you got for this?
So I need to see Mitch Trubisky gone. That would be nice for let me tell you something. Mitch Trubisky to me is like Kenny Pickett, where it's like whenever I see this person on the field, I lose a little bit of my love of football. It's just so incredibly exhausting watching these two guys try to play quarterback or whatever it is they're doing out there. So, listen, backup quarterback doesn't really matter for this team because if they don't have Josh Allen, nothing really matters. And I understand that's not how a general manager thinks of these things, and they're trying to actually think of a contingency. And I understand that theoretically, Mitchell Trubisky has started football games and even started a playoff game or two. So what? He's still bad. Like a bad player is a bad player, and they just need to, I don't know, find something else there, and hopefully for cheaper, because they paid Mitch Trubisky more than just league minimum, and I'll never understand why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the backup quarterback doesn't matter to me. It's nice to have a higher tier guy, but you're not banking on your guy being gone. And if you are, that's weird. You shouldn't do that. And Josh Allen is an MVP quarterback. We can actually say that now. Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool? He's an MVP quarterback. Without him, you're already in a very terrible position. The same way any team who loses their starter would be in an awful position. So I never invest that much time into it. If they could keep Mitch, they could move on from Mitch. They could move on from Mitch and make Mike White their primary backup, which I guess I'd be pretty cool with because I do kind of like Mike White as a backup. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't think you really need to make a change unless you think backup is a need. But it's Josh Allen's room. It's Josh Allen's world. And we're all living in it, as it seems. Moving on to running back. And the only take I have here for this, because it's Ty Johnson as the free agent. I put Gilliam in tight ends, by the way, spoiler alert, not as a running back group. But Ty Johnson, the role for him expanded very significantly once they got him last year when Joe Brady took over. And you just saw from that Jets game on the actual lean on this guy as not only a pass blocker, but a third down back. And this year, even more so. I mean, you want to talk about value contracts, probably one of the best in the NFL when you look at how much they paid him and the output they got from him. He's an awesome player. I mean, do you think they re-sign him? Do you want to commit money to your, third down running back, or do you think they move on and try to, replace him with maybe expanded roles for the running backs, or maybe a rookie and what is also a very good running back class?
So it is important to bring up that this is a great running back class. However, what Ty Johnson brings to this team is when he's on the field, there is no tell, right? Like when he's on the field, they can run the ball with Ty Johnson. They can throw the ball with Ty Johnson as a pass protector. They can throw the ball to Ty Johnson, which
Mhm.
they've done. I mean, that Detroit game, he was the leading receiver in that game, which is a crazy thing to think about. But I think that he is a really important and part of this offense. And I think that, I mean, I've said this throughout this past season, just that this is probably one of, if not the best, like stable of running backs in the NFL. And I imagine that Ray Davis will have a better and more expanded role in year two, especially as they start to figure out what they want to do with James Cook, right? And that contract as well. But uh, Ty Johnson is just such a steady presence for this team, and
Mhm.
someone that not only contributes highly on offense, but also is a pretty important part of special teams as well. So I don't think it would be the best move to move on from what Ty Johnson brings to this team. And I think I would be remiss to just sort of gloss over just, oh, well, he's the third string running back. Well, he's a pretty darn good third string running back. For a lot of teams, there's going to be teams that if he does hit free agency, I'm not saying a bidding war is going to start over someone like Ty Johnson, but he's gonna get a little paycheck here
Mhm.
that another team is going to be like that. That's going to be some of the best like value for dollar that we'll spend all year.
Yeah, and that's where I have like I'm torn. I love Ty Johnson. I'd happily bring him back, but I don't think it's going to be the same money. And they'll have a little more cap relief this year, but I still think their investments need to be as sound as possible. So if the market for Ty Johnson exceeds, let's call it even like if it's a 1 year deal for like 5 million, which I mean, I'm just spitballing. Like, do you still feel comfortable paying that if his role is more situational than primary? But he was really good. And I saw RJ, I think it was RJ's comment about Ty Johnson being wide receiver one from week 10 and on, which is like kind of true in a way. And it hurts to say that, but also not, because he was really good and really effective. And I do think that the final say on it is really Josh Allen. And if Josh Allen wants his guy back, then I think he'll try to get him back. But also, the most success you have of Ty Johnson's career has been here in Buffalo. I mean, the way they've leaned on him, the way that he's found his role, but also has done really well in any situation you've asked him to do, whether it's pass pro, whether it's as a receiver downfield across the field, or as a runner, even if it's a bit of a limited role in how he's running. He's been really good. And he's been a really nice change of pace, so much so that I think that they got more comfortable using him as back two than Ray Davis, especially in times where Davis might have been banked up. I still think Davis's role expands too. So it's a matter of just like how much do they value him. I'm so torn on it, but I would bring him back just for the reason that you got the chemistry, the familiarity, no growing pains from a rookie, which you got last year, but had that offset because of Cook's growth and Ty Johnson being here. Now you have Cook for another year. You could maintain the chemistry and that role for Ty Johnson, maybe even being more expanded. And Ray Davis gets another year to establish himself. And if you get growth of Ray Davis as a runner, as a pass catcher, as a blocker, you really do continue to fortify that room as one of the best in the NFL, maybe even the best in the NFL when you talk about role, value, and just overall effectiveness. So I'm on team pay him, but if it's like a crazy contract for a 1 year deal or for like a 2 year deal, if he finds his money elsewhere, I wish him nothing but the best. The dude came in with a lot to prove and proved it, and he's been exponentially beneficial and valuable to the Buffalo Bills offense. But let's move on to OL, David. And I don't have much for it. I'm fine with the room as it is. The starting group was awesome. One of the best lines in the league, pass blocking, run blocking, especially. They've made investments there. I'm always cool with depth, but I'd rather just get depth from the draft because I believe in Aaron Cromer's development. You have any strong opinions on offensive line for this episode?
No strong opinions. I think one of the ways that they can help themselves in the future and also give a little bit of relief for the cap right now would be to extend Connor McGovern, the starting center, who has been really, really good for this team. Just a really solid player. I mean, there was a lot of concern, I think, for when they decided to move on from Mitch Morse, and rightfully so, because Mitch Morse was such a critical part of this team and his personality and his leadership and all that. It was a tough one to move on from, right? But moving McGovern to that spot also created concern because it was like, okay, I mean, he's played center before back in college, but he hasn't played this a whole lot in the NFL. So what is this really going to be the plan? And obviously they draft Cedric Van Granger from Georgia late, but he ends up not being really needed or necessary because Connor McGovern took over that spot and did a great job there. And that's what you wanted to see. Here's the thing that gets sort of overlooked and underrated about just how good Aaron Kromer is at what he does. They moved their starting left guard to center, and then the Alec Anderson type of player last year was David Edwards, and they just said, "Hey, he's just going to be the starting left guard now," and that was it. And the offensive line was great. And I understand that David Edwards had starting experience before. He had started plenty of games for the Rams when Aaron Kromer was there. So there was a certain sense of comfortability there. But even then, that's still kind of a crazy thing to just be like, yeah, we're just going to take one of our extra offensive linemen. He'll be our starting left guard. And that's it. And it worked. And also Alec Anderson is going to be our extra offensive lineman. And he's going to kick everyone's ass. And it's going to be great. And it was sure. So no strong feelings. Extend Connor McGovern. I'm totally okay with this.
Completely agree. I think extending him is paramount now. He did a great job in the role. And now, again, another year of him and the luxury you have to have SVPG behind him if you do need him at all. And now with another year under his belt and Cromer development, which is like adding, again, a force multiplier to development of offensive linemen, that's huge. So, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with that. I mean, Alec Anderson's an exclusive rights free agent. So just extend the offer, keep him, no doubts. I mean, I'm cool with it. And yeah, I think like the one sleeper that I'm kind of excited for as like a your future guy and just let him keep marinating is Tylen Grable. Like this guy with the size he has and the push he had and the role he had, I think it was UCF. I feel like there's a future for him on this team, and they're just keeping him stashed for when they'll eventually need him. So I love Aaron Kromer, man. We could do an Aaron Kromer episode someday, man. That he's done for a group that just needed like rejuvenation after a couple years ago has just, I can never speak enough praises for. So shout out to Kromer and shout out to the OL. All right. Wide receiver. And I simply just put, if he's not cheap, let Cooper walk, re-sign Mac Hollins, find a separator. What do you think, David?
I'm generally in agreement with all that. What Amari Cooper did was important, right? Even if the stats weren't there, what he did was important, just getting guys into the position that was more correct for them. Getting Keon to just be someone who can attack one-on-one matchups, right? And pushing Shakir just securely into the slot role, putting Curtis Samuel more in that, play you wherever sort of role. That's what they needed to do. And making Mac Hollins that extra role guy that when he's on the field and he's getting targets, it's for a reason, and he comes up well, and he comes up with big plays, and he comes up in the red zone, and that's all well and good. But they need, if they don't sign Amari Cooper again, which I think would be fine, and I don't have like a super strong opinion about like they need to keep Amari Cooper. But if he wants to stay here and he wants to take what would certainly be probably a very cheap deal, I'm all for it. I think that's totally fine because I think an extra year in this offense would be good for him. I think that, even though he's older and whatnot, I mean, I'm earlier I was advocating for Brandon Cooks, who I think is the same age. So It is what it is. Again, Darius Slayton could be an option, and I'm all for that. Hollywood Brown, there's injury history there that I don't love, but the idea of it, the theory of Hollywood Brown is very interesting to me. I want speed of some sort that can stretch the field horizontally, right? Or vertically, rather, because they have enough that can stretch horizontally. Like Khalil Shakir can stretch you horizontally. Curtis Samuel has shown he can stretch you horizontally. They need something deep. They need a way to win deep that isn't just like go up and grab the ball like Keon Coleman does. They need somebody who can just scorch past guys in coverage and force some deep coverages to not only allow for the run game to continue to be the focus and the onus of how the offense moves the ball down the field most of the time, but also allowing the other guys like Shakir and Samuel and others to do what they do and operate underneath with a little bit more space, a little more air around them.
Mhm. Great points. So the Amari Cooper discussion, I am comfortable with bringing, like I said earlier, I'm comfortable with bringing Amari Cooper back for the right contract. And I do think that his impact on the team was definitely there. I think that even if it wasn't matched with production that you wanted, he also came here middle of the year, had to learn a playbook, and he still was an impact player just from being there on the field. And like you said, putting guys in the right positions to succeed, more of their natural roles. No one has to wear too many hats if they're not supposed to be wearing too many hats. And therefore, you can get more comfort. The thing that I also think is important when we have the Cooper discussion this offseason is the injury he had, which was a bit of a freak one. And that it kept him off the field for a few games, which of course hurts his production, but also hurts the ramp up as far as how much impact he'll have when he comes back. Is he going to be himself right away? Is he going to be able to block it all? Is he going to have to be limited because of that injury and missing game time? How fast is he going to catch up to the field when he gets back onto it? So I think for that reason, what the Bills might have actually walked into is a situation where, because the production took a dip from his usual expectations, they could get him for a reasonable deal. And if it is, I'm totally comfortable with it because I think fully healthy Amari Cooper, which you were seeing shades of before he got hurt in Seattle, so it really happened super quickly, was gearing up to be a very vital part and reliable part of this offense. Of course, he goes hurt. You have to kind of lean into different things offensively with who you're throwing the ball to. Maybe because of that, it kind of minimized as much of Cooper's role, but still was an impactful player. So again, just for the right contract, but with him, I'm not going to lose my mind if they let him go. I'm not going to lose my mind if they re-sign him. I think if you do re-sign him, what you did was give yourself less question marks for the draft, which is always a good thing, especially with a guy like Cooper, who, when healthy, is still an impactful player, even if he's a little bit older now, a little longer in the tooth. Matt Collins, to me, is the paramount return, though. That's the player I want to bring back at all costs. I think what he did for this team, given the expectations, is another just tremendous bang for your buck, amazing value contract. The contributions as a blocker, the contributions on special teams, and the contributions as a vertical threat were all there and all depended on. And we talked about Ty Johnson earlier, and I didn't even bring this part up, but it's something that Mac and Ty, I think, both bring to the Bills, but specifically to Josh Allen, is the recognition of how he plays off script, which is a skill for receivers. Some are good at it. Some are not good at it. And when you're not good at it, it can lead to trouble, because if you don't know that Josh Allen is going full send YOLO, I am going to throw this goddamn thing and you better be ready for it, that could lead to problems. But if you're someone like Ty Johnson or Matt Collins or even Keon Coleman developing this a bit, and you're like, oh no, oh no, Josh, oh no, we got to get into position. All right. Like, you know, the scene from The Office where the fire drill's happening? That's what I think is going through a wide receiver's mind when Josh Allen goes off script. That's exactly it. The guys that can work with the chemistry of Josh Allen, which is so important in an offense where you have a quarterback like that. Matt Collins is one of those guys. He's earned a payday. I don't think he's going to be making insane money just due to the age. And even though it was a good year, the production's still not otherworldly. But I want the Mackining to return. I want to bring this man back to the roster for the vibes alone, but also what he did as the floor of your wide receiver room is just so awesome. It's valuable. There's a place for it, and I don't think it's going to go away. And if you could just build upon it, whether that's bringing a healthy Cooper back, whether that's going and getting someone in the draft, like a true top end separator, like a Jalen Royals or someone, that is, to me, like the best thing you could do for the offense and Josh Allen as far as wide receiver room construction. So bring Mac back. And otherwise, if you don't bring Cooper back, a separator of some kind is the only other thing I want. I hope they can find it. I like Hollywood Brown. I looked at the free agent list of wide receivers. It will make you sad.
Not great.
It's not great. Yeah, it's not great. I mean, Brandon Cooks could be cool. He's still got speed. I wouldn't hate it, but again, for the right price. But there's no one on here. I'm like, you got to bring this guy in. It's going to make a world. Like, you got Robert Woods, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, like Nelson Aguilar. They're not bad. It's just
Nelson Aguilar is bad. Let's not do this.
I'm gonna
seen
let
that guy
you
in Philadelphia.
That.
I'm not doing that.
I will let you run. Yeah. I'm too nice. Yeah. So it's not a great list. And for that reason, retaining Amari Cooper would be cool because of the familiarity, but I think draft pick would probably be the better choice if you're looking for true top end or one of the younger guys. Like I do like Tutu Atwell, despite being like a smaller frame. He's fast as hell and he gets open down the field. And Eric actually did a really great breakdown on him. So there's options, but yes, I think we're in agreement on what this wide receiver room needs. And personally, I hope they can add that top end separator because it does feel like a missing piece, unless that is Cooper and he was just hurt and needed to get ramped up. So any final thoughts on that, David, before we move on to tight end?
Let's move on to tight end.
Let's move on to tight end. And tight end, I don't have too much on. Quentin Morris is a restricted free agent. So if you get outbid for him, okay. Fun. I like Quentin Morris as a blocker. I think he's probably going to wind up staying. I don't think they're going to pay an exponential amount of money for him. Reggie Gilliam is interesting. I think Reggie Gilliam has been criminally underutilized by multiple OCs, and it drives me nuts because Reggie Gilliam, when he was on the field, was a huge boost for this running offense, and I am so glad Joe Brady saw it. But even using Reggie Gilliam as like an actual receiver out of the backfield could be fun, and it happens like once in a while, and it drives me nuts because, again, utilizing your fullback can really add wrinkles. Look at some of these offenses around the league who do it. It's fun, and we don't do it enough, and I like fullbacks. These guys are just refrigerators that want to hurt people, and it's awesome. So Reggie Gilliam, David, or really anyone in this tight end room, what are your thoughts on it? Needs, who goes, who doesn't go, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, if they get outbid for Quentin Morris, so be it. Right? I mean, I like Quentin Morris a lot. He has maybe 5 catches in a season, and somehow 4 of them are the most clutch plays imaginable.
Yep. And he did again this year, didn't he? Wasn't there something?
It was the Dolphins game.
Thank you. Every year, Quentin Morris is good for one insanely clutch play. I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know where it will happen, but he does it every single year, and it's hilarious. And it's almost like, would you pay a contract just to know that no matter what the situation is, Quentin Morris is catching a touchdown, and it's going to give you the lead and win you the game?
There's one game where Quentin Morris will give you a win. Are you willing to pay money just for that one win? It's we'll see. But even outside that, he's been a really solid contributor as a third tight end. I don't know. I have thoughts about this tight end room, specifically with regards to Dalton Kincaid.
Ooh.
Is that really what we're going to discuss here in terms of who stays and who goes? Probably not. But there's a lot of thoughts on Dalton Kincaid that I have, and we'll see if we get to share some of them at some point during the offseason.
So briefly, I will say this. My stance on Dalton Kincaid, while it's still there, has softened a smidge. And what really swayed me was just the catchable target rate for him, which I do think matters. However, I have concerns over that improving because of the limitation of how often he gets opportunity. That's the biggest thing. We don't have to go down that road right now. I hope Dalton Kincaid is on a beach somewhere, just getting his mind right before he gets back to training, because that dude went through hell. But okay. Anyways, we won't go down that road.
Anyway.
Tight end. I will say this. Yeah, if they get outbid for Morris, whatever. Gilliam, I think they'll bring back because I don't think he's going to command a lot of money. Knows the offense, became a blocking, a very reliable blocking piece down the road. So why not? I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills draft one. And I say this for I think the class is deep, and you could find a nice prospect that whether he has to start out as a practice squad player, whether he gets on the bottom end of the roster, great. But also, what is the future of Dawson Knox? What is the future going to look like as he gets older, as he deals with injuries each year? I still believe in him as a player. I think Dawson Knox is a good tight end, but what is the future? Now that the season's over, how many years are you reliably keeping Dawson Knox around? And do you want to maybe get a talented tight end from a good class in your room now so that maybe the time to move on next year isn't as big of a transition? And if Dalton Kincaid doesn't take that leap as a tight end, as a complete piece, maybe you have someone that you can comfortably fill that void with. So I'm keeping an eye out for like the fourth round because I feel like there will still be prospects for them. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if they use one of their picks on tight end this year. That's all I'll say on it. Again, it's just speculation, but you got to look at the life after these players. And as much as I like Knox, like getting into his later 20s with the injury history he has, with the money you paid him, again, I am understanding of that contract. I still like the player, but I do think if they can get out of that money, if he's not putting up crazy dynamic numbers or making a massive impact that couldn't be replicated by like a really good blocking tight end with some hands, I could see them going that route. So, I mean, any final thoughts, anything on that, David, before we move on to defense?
I'm all for finding another tight end in this class. It's a really really good class, and I think that it just behooves you as a team to look at a draft and say, where are the strongest positions? Where are we willing and or able to take strength from a class that has an actual strength from it, as opposed to necessarily like, okay, well, we need this particular position, even if there's not a great player at this spot, but we need somebody here, so let's just draft this guy. I'm never a big fan of that. So a tight end in this group would be, specifically another blocking tight end, would be very, very nice to have. Let's move on to defense.
Agreed. And moving on to defensive end, my notes for this as we look at the room are I'm willing to let KC2 Hill go. DeJuan Smoot, I would be willing to bring back, but it would have to be, again, a reasonable contract. The injury kind of took him out, and we didn't get to see what he could really be. But in the times he played, I think there were flashes. Even in the final two games, the playoff games, there were moments where you saw Smoot and you're like, okay, there's some push there. Like, I like this. I think he's a good player, but you got to stay on the field. I hope he could. He has injury concerns. And I want some edge rushers in this draft. There's so many. There's so many D linemen. Like, please draft edge rushers. Please draft defensive tackles. I'm gonna curse. I'm fucking begging you, Brandon. Please. Please. Just please.
So
draft
you can go over there and beg. With regard to DeJuan Smoot, I actually really like DeJuan Smoot, and I feel like when he was healthy and when he was playing, you could feel his presence because he brings a great physicality to a defensive line that doesn't necessarily have a lot of super like aggressive, physical, hit you in the mouth sort of guys, right? So I like the attitude that he brings, and I think that Eric and Anthony broke down the fact that he's one of those guys who will make the calls to the defensive line and adjust things for them. There's something else to that. I mean, he's been in the NFL for a long time. So I think that there's an experience there that I would like to have, especially if you are going to be bringing in a bunch of young rookie guys in this draft. Hopefully they do. But it's good to have another presence there and someone else that can, especially someone like him who can work inside out. Like, we were like kind of briefly mentioned that with Milton Williams for Philadelphia. I mean, Dwayne Smoot can do that as well. Not quite to the same degree, but he just I think he wins more with his physicality and his intelligence and his experience more than just overall physical build and athleticism like a Milton Williams does. Regardless, though, I like Juwan Smoot and what he brings to the table. I am totally willing to have him back on this team, but like you said, it's got to be somewhat reasonable.
Mhm. Yeah, if the money's too big, I'm good because I think there are prospects as well. At least in the research I've done, there's still a lot more work to do on that. But in what I do know, I could see a few players that could fill that role, but it would take development because they'd have to get used to the defense and communicating it at the pro level. So it's like, do you want to go through that, or would you rather bring Spoot back for a year and then maybe draft someone to do that, but they have the year to learn under him? Not that they're the same player at all. At least I haven't done enough research on the prospect to know if they're the same player, but like Dion Walker comes to mind all the time when I think of someone who could be like the all over the line piece that could emerge into that just for the leadership role he has at UK. The size we're going to do a draft episode, and I don't want to get too deep into prospects because like I absolutely am full send on D line, man. I am. And just edge rusher in general, like wishful thinking from Brandon being Hart in the right place with Von Miller. What does the future hold for him? Does he even if he is he even still on the team? I don't know. I don't think so after June 1st, but I think that they really got to get younger at the position group outside of because AJ Epinez is here for one more year. You have Solomon, but he's unproven. Greg Rousseau is entering a contract year. Do you pay him? Let's get some edge rushers, man. Like if it's a trade for Myles Garrett, I'll be happy about it. That's fine. I love Myles Garrett. I think he is the best pure defensive lineman in the league, and he can play all over the line too. So if your enhancement from Dewan Smoot is Myles Garrett, that's pretty damn good upgrade. And getting slightly younger, but it, you just got to get D linemen and you got to get edge rushers, but you also got to get DTs. It's a DT rich class. We're gonna move on to DT. And my note is cut all DTs not named Ed, Daquan Jones, or Dwayne Carter, and prioritize one tech and multi gap bodies. David, back to you. What do you think on this?
I'm willing to cut Taquan Jones at this point as well.
Mm,
Even if it doesn't save a ton of money, which it doesn't, right? Uh, I just I don't know what exactly he's really bringing to this team at this point. I don't love what we saw out of Daquan Jones last year. And I think that you have to be willing to take some take a bit of reality with this, right? Daquan Jones was really, really good for a few years here in Buffalo, and probably better than what he was in pretty much every other stop that he made before he came to Buffalo. The disruption that he had, the power that he played with, it was really, really good. You also have to acknowledge that what he was last year was not that guy. And another year older kind of makes me feel like, is this really going to get better with another year? Probably not. So I think you gotta have this conversation of let's move on and just really retool this interior defensive line room in particular. The edges, like we talked about, I mean, there are at least guys there, right? Regardless of what they decide to do with Von Miller, and who knows what their thought process is with that right now. Maybe they just go all out and find a Myles Garrett or whatever. But there are guys there that I at least feel reasonably confident in. But I don't like a lot of this interior defensive line group right now. I think that Ed Oliver, at least especially in the playoffs, Ed Oliver was very good in the playoffs.
hmm
He was very good in the playoffs. It was probably his best run in the playoffs that we've seen, which was very encouraging because a lot of the year was not like amazing for him, but that was encouraging to see. And Dwayne Carter, I mean, he's a second round pick or a second year player, a third round pick. I think that obviously they're keeping him and we'll see what he's able to bring in year two. And I was someone like you who was a very big Dwayne Carter fan and really thought this was a great pick and a really good fit for this Bills defense. But it's one of those things where it's like, hey, that's a nice theory. But it's gotta meet reality at some point.
Yeah.
So they need Dwayne Carter to turn into something. I saw someone in the chat earlier suggest, well, maybe he turns into Jordan Phillips. Well, I really don't want Jordan Phillips. I don't want Jordan Phillips anywhere near this goddamn team anymore. I'm so sick of Jordan Phillips. I'm over it. Cool. He wears the big parka while he goes to practice when it's cold. Enough. No, not happening. Not doing it.
Well,
Not
how about
again.
this? We could go after the Maryland prospect named Jordan Phillips, and he
Hey,
looks
replace
fun.
Jordan Phillips with Jordan Phillips. Someone else in the chat also said that. So,
Yeah,
so
I like
someone
what
else in
I've
the
seen from
chat
him.
is also watching the air raid hour because I know that's one
Yeah.
of their guys.
Oh yeah. Do either of them have Maryland connections? I had to ask them. Like, I don't know if either one went there because it seems like I'm always seeing them because they were talking about what's his name, Ty Felton, the receiver too. And I've seen them talk about other guys before, but maybe it's just I somehow always happen to see them talking about Maryland guys, even though I have
I don't
no.
think so.
Oh, right. So they just
Maybe
Maryland
it's just
guys.
the allure of that flag, right?
It
Like
is a cool flag.
it's a cool flag, and everyone from Maryland will let you know how cool it is because they have it plastered over like every single thing.
Yes, they
It's
do.
such a small state. They're like, this is our flag, and you're gonna know it.
Hey guys, did you see this yet? Hey guys, did you see this yet? Hey, by the way, it's on all of our signs. In case you want to get off here, there's more flags this way. You guys should totally check it out. It's super cool. Yeah,
And
my
crabs.
and crabs. Well, at least the seafood. And yeah, DT. I mean, it's just I'm in lockstep with you. It needs an overhaul. I still, again, have hope in Dwayne Carter. Ed Oliver, I was pleased with his playoff performance. It's not the most consistent with him, but I think if you get him the guy next to him, he'll shine. But I would keep Daquan Jones. One, it's 1 year left on his deal. Why not? But if you do draft young, one tech, nose tackle, whatever you want to, whatever hat you give him, multifaceted role, I do like the idea of him being a permanently rotational piece. Like, okay, your final year here is mentor the young guys and also fill in when these young guys got to come off the field. Because in my eyes, it's a luxury to have veteran leadership on a team. And I think that while he did decline with his skill set and it wasn't a good year from him, at least by his standards, by the standards we set for him, one more year. If you have your 1T of the future, that's exactly why he's there. It's to pass the torch in a more efficient way and where you don't have to worry or have to have any sort of like immediate need for this starter to hit right then and there. Rather, hey, if he needs a few games to ramp up, but we start seeing that kind of like Milano over Humber transition, boom, let's get it. Let him go, or at least let him get a reduced role, and he'll just fill in for run D or the occasional pass rush snaps. So be it. Moving on to linebacker, I really don't have anything. I like the linebacker crew. You got Milano for 1 more year. I believe it's 1 more year. So because of that, you're talking about maybe finding a successor if you don't think it's Dorian Williams. I think they like Dorian Williams, and each year he's steadily progressed, but I'm worried about him as a pass coverage linebacker. So I'm cool with drafting one later rounds. What do you think about this? I mean, do you have any strong feelings about linebacker room?
Um, is Balin Spector hurt again? Like right now,
Uh,
is he currently hurt?
He might have sat the wrong way and, maybe needs like one of those neck pillow things if he even watches, which if he does, he'd probably, not enjoy that last 5 seconds.
No, I'm with you. I think the linebacker room is really good. I like Terrell Bernard is so good at diagnosing what's going on pre and post snap, and just brings a great leadership and speed and versatility. Matt Milano is who he is, and even if he's maybe not the same level of player that he was in the past, he's still good. And I think you saw that in the playoffs as well, right? Like he was somebody that started to come on in the playoffs and made some really good plays. So, health with Milano is obviously always a concern, and it sucks
Mhm.
that that's the case, but it's something that has been the case since he's been here and drafted in 2017. So it's not necessarily anything new. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of how long are these injuries, right? Because last year it was just so. Honestly, I was shocked that he came back at all, right? Like I thought that was off the table for a long time. So it was kind of surprising to me that he would came back at all, and it took a while, but he was able to kind of regain his form somewhat. And I like Dorian Williams. I felt Dorian Williams did a very admirable job, and he's somebody that again brings a certain level of physicality that I really really like. I mean,
Mhm.
he'll come up and make some plays from
Yeah.
the second level, and I appreciate that about him. I'm interested to see what year 3 with Dorian Williams is going to be like, and we'll see. He's never going to be a complete linebacker. He's not going to be somebody that can play coverage all that effectively, but if he can do like enough, then maybe they'll feel comfortable enough with him where maybe he is sort of the successor to Matt Milano, just in a different way, because you can't really replicate what Matt Milano does or what Matt Milano was. It's just that maybe you can find a way to mitigate that effect, and the money for whatever a Dorian Williams contract would be for a second contract would not be what Matt Milano would get. So in essence, you're saving money on someone in the future that, yes, you're not getting the same overall effectiveness from Dorian Williams as Matt Milano, assuming both are healthy and ready to go and playing at full level. But, you know, you're using that money somewhere else to improve a different position. And I think that that's also fine. So I feel pretty comfortable with this linebacker room as it is right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Milano's health is really a lot of it, but if he does stay healthy, and I mean, he played a stretch of games where he was able to stay on the field, which is encouraging going into next year with a full off season. If he stays healthy, it's him and Bernard with Williams mixing in on 4-3 if they want to run that a bit more. But I think the successor component is why I think it's worthwhile to just draft the insurance just in case. But also, Ulofashio was another player you got that kind of had that. When I saw it, I was like, maybe this is a guy that fills in too. And I like the physicality he played with at Washington. So it is possible that they have sights set on him, or Buffalo Joe that I've seen multiple comments about. A fun story that, I mean, maybe he does get some shine and maybe they do really like him. I have to wonder if they wind up with that UB linebacker too, but I don't know what his draft projection is. If there is one, I don't know how valued he is, but I'm cool with the room. I think at least for next season, you got it locked down. And again, Williams has been really nice of a luxury to have if Milano goes down, just because, again, the run defense component with him is there. He's extremely physical. He's extremely heat seeking. The speed he plays with when he processes a run is really good. It's just pass coverage. And if that does develop and he is able to kind of not get fooled on certain looks or misdirections, all of a sudden, I'm not worried at all. I think at that point, Milano can move on. And I love Matt Milano. That's not a spite, just more so like he's going to be 30. It's probably not money you want to pay. Let Williams rock. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But let's move on to what I think is another pressing need for this team. Two positions that have needs, but this one more so than the other, and that's corner. Because Russell Douglas is a free agent. So you are essentially, if you're not bringing him back, looking for CB2 because Kyer Elam, unfortunately, just did not pan out to be CB2. He just didn't. Like, call it what it is. The expectations, I had hope for him with the coaching changes and maybe more man looks and maybe more of an emphasis in his development. It didn't work. He just simply, in my eyes, needs a fresh start, whether that's, somehow with the Bills this year in a lesson role, whether that's a trade to get something from him and just let him go be somewhere where maybe he gets a chance to play. I just don't think it's working out anymore with him. And it's unfortunate because he seems like a good dude. He seems like someone who does have talent, but the mental component of the game is visible when you watch him struggle on the field. And there are plays he does make, but it's overshadowed by just egregiously bad ones, especially in that KC game where he was thrown into a rough spot, but it's the AFC Championship. You got to play buttoned up. So the corner room I have concerns with, especially for that starting CB2 role. And I just don't know if bringing Douglas back is the answer as he gets older. David, what do you think about this?
Yeah, the Rousseau Douglas trade in 2023 was really phenomenal at the time. He was such a playmaker and did such a great job coming into this defense in the middle of the season and just doing an incredible job. It wasn't the same in 2024. I think he was still good. I think there were some people who were kind of slandering Rousseau Douglas and what he brought to the team just because the numbers weren't quite what they were the year before. And unfortunately, that's how some people view players. It's just through a box score. But I think that there's still something left with Rousseau Douglas. And I think if they brought him back, that would be fine. But this is more about money than it is about the player. And even then, right, like if they decide to move on from Rousseau Douglas, so be it. This coaching staff does a really good job with coaching up defensive backs 9 times out of 10. Right, whether it's Christian Benford or a Tre'Davious White or or Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. I mean, there's just such a history with this team and developing defensive backs, even guys like Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. I understand that people didn't necessarily like them a whole lot. Levi Wallace was undrafted and Dane Jackson was a seventh round pick. Uh, Come on, right? Like,
Yeah.
to turn those guys into starting defensive backs in the NFL is no easy feat, and the Bills did a really good job of doing that. They weren't like elite level, like or a high level player like say a Christian Benford, but even so, I have faith that whoever they decide to have opposite of Christian Benford will be a good player for them, a starting caliber player who will contribute and play well within this defense. As far as safety goes, maybe I'm in the minority in this, and I wasn't necessarily expecting to be, but I don't necessarily feel like there's a need at safety right now. I feel like Taylor Rapp played really, really well, and I understand there's this narrative about, oh well, he's either hurt or he just hurt some other player on the team, and it's like, okay, if you want this dude to make the plays that he did against the Jets, right, like saving multiple touchdowns against the Jets, you're gonna have to live with the type of player that he is, and he does come in hot like a missile. He comes in with a lot of heat and plays with a certain recklessness that it allows him to do what he does, and you're gonna have to live with that if you want the good plays that you get from him. And I think he does make some good plays, and I'm a very big believer in Cole Bishop. I think he's going to have a
Yeah.
fantastic year too. There's no doubt in my mind about Cole Bishop and what he can bring for this team. The fact that he was that close, for those of you who are listening to this and aren't live, my fingers are very close together, to an interception in the playoffs, and had it stolen away from him in just the most egregious, bizarre, Chiefsy way imaginable
Yeah.
is astounding. But it felt like he was supposed to be there, right? Like, it didn't feel like he was out of place in that game. It felt like he played pretty well overall.
Mhm.
I think the combination of Bishop and Rapp is a good one. I'm all for it. And just taking a very quick brief look at who might be available at safety, right? I mean, there's guys out there. Again, if they want a reunion, Jordan Poyer might be available. Because he just loves
Um,
those New York State taxes, doesn't he?
yeah, he
Uh,
spoke very highly of them when he left.
but there's other guys that are out there that could be interesting. Maybe a Quandre Diggs or even a John Johnson, who is surprisingly under the age of 30. Uh, Even Von Bell, right? Like there's guys that are out there that you could bring in to play a certain role. I and that's assuming that someone like DeMar Hamlin leaves. Maybe they bring back DeMar Hamlin and he's that third safety, and it's fine. Um, but if they decide that Hamlin's gonna get let go and all that sort of stuff, so be it. They'll find someone, they'll bring him in, and they'll probably be fine.
Yep.
I don't have any major concerns about defensive backs with this team.
Yeah, working back from safety. As far as DeMar Hamlin goes, I I'm willing for the team to move on. But I like what Hamlin did this year. I think he got a lot of criticism that wasn't fair, and some that was. But safety is a position like that. It's very your errors are very easy to diagnose, and your high level play or the plays you do make kind of go unnoticed, or it's like it wasn't your fault and you're cleaning up the mess, and yet you're going to be blamed for it when it was probably something in the second level or a coverage assignment that got messed up and put you in a terrible spot. So DeMar Hamlin was really someone that I think got a lot of flack. And I think it's just the elevated attention that, he drew, obviously, for unfortunate reasons. I'm not trying to make it, like it's his fault as much as it almost got like a target on his back from people, and it was really weird. Like, it was just really strange behavior from a lot of people that I just didn't get. And I actually talked to Uber on Roundup once about, like, when we were talking about Hamlin, I just went off on like people who straight up called this man a clone. Like, what? Damar Hamlin had a perfectly fine season, and like I just don't understand the hate the guy got. But why I think they could move on is because personally, I think the play, while it was solid, if you have the chance to bring in like an established vet for maybe like a smaller contract, who maybe if he's a little older, but he's the tertiary safety that just rotates in and has played in the league, I'm fine with that. Or drafting one again. Like I think there's
Yeah.
safety prospects in this class you could go for that even though we have two, I think, very sound starters, you need to have the third body. And I think Cam Lewis is fine as a utility man, but I don't want him to be the third safety. I would prefer him to be break glass in case of emergency and primarily a backup nickel. So I would rather go get a younger safety or go get a free agent. Or if it's Hamlin on the right price, that's fine too. Like he isn't it really doesn't move me either way. I actually do like the safety room. I like Taylor Rapp a lot. I like the physicality he plays with. I think when you're talking about the philosophical shift for this defense, it kind of starts with him just for the aggression he plays with for that style, the tone setting nature of his play. But he is a good safety. He's a good coverage safety. He's made great plays on the ball numerous times this season, has been on the good end of good turnovers. And I think he's someone that's worth keeping as your starter. And Bishop, I mean, yeah, Houston was a bad game. Just thrown into a bad spot. I thought he played well down the stretch, and I think a very continued lean on his role is going to be huge for him. And I think he's going to be a huge part of this defense for the foreseeable future as you're starting, if you want to call him the Poyer to hide of this defense. Like he is someone that I'm really excited to watch more of. I love the athleticism. I love the hard hitting nature of him. Did he have rookie lapses? Yes. It's a hard position to get right as a rookie because there is so much you have to know. But I want Bishop to be that fortified starter, and I think he can be. So for that room, cool with letting Hamlin walk, cool with bringing him back, whatever they do. I appreciate the player, and I'm totally fine with, veteran free agent or a draft pick. Corner, Benford's the guy. I'm so confident in him. I want to extend Christian Benford, keep him here. Let's maintain him as CB1 because he's more than earned it. And before the injury, he made a play in that Kansas City game that's kind of always that alleviated my doubt. Like he just manned up Hollywood Brown, went down the field with him, made a great play on the ball, and then we lost him to a stupid freak play the very next play. And it's just health is my main concern for him. But during the season, he was fine. He was there. He was present. And I think you can build around him as a CB1 for Rousseau Douglas. I love the trade. I thought he made some great plays for the Bills, but I'm willing to move on to get younger at that position because I'm just big on like it's kind of my philosophy with running backs. Keep corner young. It's such a demanding position where you need to be quite literally in the peak of your athletic ability to maintain a solid level as a corner in the NFL, along with the mental component. And I think Douglas could still be very good. Again, the right money, a depth role, sure. But starting CB2, I'd like to get younger. And I'd really like it to be one of those 3 early picks or, first 2 round picks they have. Because I just think there are options for you in the draft that have that kind of man capability that you're looking for with this very obvious transition into more man rates for this defense. So go get a corner. I think it's worth it. I do like Jamarcus Ingram as a depth piece. Kyer Elam, I personally think they move on from. And if so, you got to get another piece. And then Codrington, I put on here, but Codrington's a returner. I like him as the returner. Keep him there. Don't put him anywhere else, please, because that's how he got hurt. Granted, it was the
Yes.
final week of the year, so that makes sense. But corner has a need. I think they can play it right in free agency and make it a little less of a wound in the draft. Really get one more hybrid corner that can play man well. And I think you're going to be in a much better spot when we get into like the later parts of the offseason. But my thoughts on the secondary and special teams, I have nothing for you, to be completely honest. Reed Ferguson will get a parking lot deal and take one for the team and come back. And, we appreciate his service. David, we'll wrap this up. You have any final thoughts that you want to say that maybe we didn't cover tonight before we sign off?
Not really. I feel like I yapped well enough for an hour and a half, so I feel pretty confident in what I've said here.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your time, dude. Seriously, you came through on very short notice, and that means a lot because obviously this was a lot to cover. And honestly, I had a lot of fun going through each one of these groups. And I think again, the offseason is a perilous time with a lot of open discourse and a lot of hypotheticals, as Bruce pointed out last week. It's going to be very fun. It's also going to make you want to pull your hair out. So let's be nice to each other and just try to have some fun with this offseason. I know it sucks that unfortunately we're in the same situation of just getting close but not hitting the end goal, but the proper offseason can really get you there and get you over that hump. And I'm hoping Brandon Bean and co. can navigate it correctly. And some of these needs that we listed, I think are the way to get there as soon as possible and hopefully get you to the Lombardi you so desperately want. But we got an MVP quarterback to lead the way, and I'm sure they can build around him accordingly. That's going to do it for us tonight, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. David, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time immensely. Let the world know what's going on in your world and where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at DFAUXY. What I'm going to be doing next, now that the roundup is over, toast to say. But for now, you can find me on there spitting off whatever I fucking feel like. And well, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to hold for me with football content or what I want to do with that, but we'll see what happens. And hopefully, the fine folks here at Cover One and just allow me to do stuff like this and come along every once in a while because it's always a fun time. I'm glad you asked me to do this today.
Hell yeah, man. And you're always welcome back. And, whatever the future holds for you, I hope it leads to something that you are truly happy with. And, the ultimate end game of just being at peace with the decision, which is all you can really ask for. But, again, I've always enjoyed speaking to you about anything, especially on an episode like this where we get to talk about a bunch of players and hear really funny takes about them. But we'll be keeping up with you every step of the way. And I'm hoping for nothing but the best for you. But people, thank you again so much for being here. And if you are watching this live before you go, once the show wraps up, so actually, never mind. Oh God, I flub the outro every goddamn week. Anyways, when the show is done, football, drop a comment on the video, drop a like if you haven't yet, share it with your friends. That is greatly appreciated, not only by myself, but by our network, as it just helps the video get more reach to other like-minded Bills fans such as yourselves. Thank you to everyone who is contributing in the Discord and who has signed up for the OnePass. Again, link in the description below. Thank you to everyone who responded to the tweet. I will try to do more of those in the near future. And our comment section, including guys like Spin who say nice things like drop a thumbs down, help the channel out. Thank you, Spin. My devil on my shoulder. I appreciate you all for your contributions tonight and checking us out this week. It means the world to me. We're in for a nice, fun off season, and I hope you can join me every step of the way. But you're going to say goodnight. Thank you all so much again for being here. Take care of each other. And as always, go Bills. We'll see you soon.